Welcome to Nobilis Erotica, the best science fiction and fantasy erotica anthology podcast in the known universe. This week, a taste of the patron-exclusive content that my patrons enjoy every month. This is episode 458. I am your host, Nobilis Reed. This week, I'm pulling a bit of content out from the Patreon campaign for you. We've already seen a bunch of new subscriptions. Thank you, Kara, Alan, Minotauros, Benjamin, and Michael, and especially Ramon, who is already a subscriber and bumped up his pledge. If you didn't hear last episode's introduction, here's why this is important. I received a terrific story from Bernie Moises that features a huge tentacle monster orgy. If you're a fan of the Monster Whisperer series, you're going to love this one. Because of the large number of characters, it's going to need a full cast. So to have the budget to actually put this on the way it deserves, I need to get some pledges up. As I record this, we are at $156 on our way to a goal of $300. Now I understand some of you might be balking at the long-term commitment of signing up on a Patreon. You'd much rather make a one-time donation, but let me assure you, it's perfectly fine if you end your patronage in August. I don't mind. All I want to do is get that number up to 300 for the transfers at the end of July. I am, however, hoping that once you've seen what the Patreon offers, such as the access to the Discord server and the exclusive content, you'll stay on. To further entice you to join up, this week I'm presenting Chapter 1 of My Wild Card, an erotic transformation serial. This is the first part of an ongoing story that my Patreon supporters are currently receiving. Here we go. My Wild Card by Nobilis Reed. Chapter 1. I've got a present for you. Connie burst into my dorm room with her prize held in one hand over her head. She tossed the cloak she wore on sunny days onto my bed. I looked up from my handheld console, then set it aside. Is that? Video card! And it's a fancy one, too. She handed me the fat little circuit board covered with chips and fans and crisscrossing wires. I turned it over in my hands, puzzled. Where did you get this? I've never seen anything like it. Usually, the chips and components were arranged in a rectangular grid to pack as many as possible into a small space. These were in a kind of a circle, with wires soldered on all over the place. It was in the trash, can you believe it? I scowled. Nobody throws away a functioning graphics card, especially a... I turned it in my hand. What brand is this even? No idea. Anyways, it wasn't really in the trash. It was from over in the computer science hardware lab. My friend Jenny told me that her partner Kelly said they had this bin where they kept prototypes they didn't need anymore, and I could give it a try. This one looked like the fanciest one in there, so I grabbed it. Now you can fix your computer. I looked back and forth between the graphics card and my girlfriend, then shrugged. I suppose it's worth a shot. Still need to figure out where to get drivers for it. I poked at the jump wires. They were so dense they looked more like embroidery than circuitry. Can't be worse than what I've got. I rolled over to my desk, pulled over the computer, its panels already open from the work I had done previously to get the burned-out graphics card to work, and slotted the new one into place. Now, if we're lucky, it'll have a default mode, and I can search for drivers. While I worked on the computer, Connie lay down on my bed, picked up a sketchbook that had been lying on the pillow, and turned the pages one by one. She flipped past manga-style warriors and sorceresses, figure studies and still lifes, architectural interiors and exteriors. There's nothing new here. I thought with your computer broken you'd go back to drawing by hand again. Oh, there's nothing like working on a computer, I replied. Besides, I've been going into photo manipulation lately, and there's no way to do that on paper. Well, back in the day they used airbrushes, but it's not the same. There's all kinds of amazing things you can do. There's money in it, too, a lot more than drawing or painting ever gets. Ah, there we go. Looks like this board was built on a standard architecture, and I can get the driver. There's a chance this might actually work. I dramatically punched a button and spun my chair around. Now we just wait for it to download. Connie tossed the sketchbook back onto the bed and stood in front of me. You are so talented. I flipped the armrests on my chair up out of the way so she could sit on my lap, facing me. And you are a miracle worker. I put my hands on her thighs, stroking the fabric stretched tight over her skin. This card isn't just a regular old video card. This is way more powerful than my old card. Tech like this goes for thousands of dollars, and that's when you can find one. You sure you're not going to get in trouble for taking this? Connie shrugged. The bin was marked shred, so they're only going to destroy it. She leaned down to give me a peck on the lips. How long is that download going to take? I glanced over my shoulder. If Windows can be trusted, 5 minutes. Oh, not enough time for a quickie then. I'll always make time for you. The computer can wait. Oh, but I want to see your art. I blushed. Oh, no you don't. I only just started doing them. I'm still learning. Bullshit. I'm sure it's great. I want to see. I slid my hands up under Connie's shirt and over the skin of her back. Come here. She leaned down for a deep kiss with her hands behind my neck. My lips parted and my tongue thrust gently into her mouth, and I felt the familiar relaxation come over her that happened whenever I kissed her. It was the best part. The idea that I could make that happen just by touching lips brought a thrill every time. I moved my hands around to squeeze her breasts and flick my fingers over her nipples. She rarely wore a bra when she visited my room, and when she did, she took it off as soon as she arrived. It was how I had known she was flirting with me that first time 3 months ago. She had shown up at my door with a crop-top t-shirt and pokey nipples. She pulled back and looked into my eyes. Show me. I blushed all over again. What? I sighed. You're gonna think it's silly. Connie put her fists on her hips and narrowed her lips at me. Rich, have I ever laughed at your art? No. I'm sure I didn't sound convinced. She hopped off my lap and grabbed the sketchbook off the bed. With just a couple of flips, she found the page she wanted and showed it to me. On the page, a sorceress stood in a defiant pose, magical fire spreading from her hands, and a pair of gigantic breasts spreading over her chest. On Connie's face, there was a wry smile. I coughed a laugh. She flipped another page. On this one, a fantasy warrior, endowed with a great sword and similarly improbable bustline, deflected an axe blow with her blade. I like your art. Behind me, the computer beeped. I turned to see a window had popped up. Reboot to complete video driver installation. I hit the button and the screen went dark. She closed the book and gave me a serious look. I don't like it that you want to keep it secret from me. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. She had a good point. My art was what had gotten her attention in the first place, and she knew the kind of thing I liked to draw. As soon as it was done rebooting, I turned around and logged in. My home screen had been transformed. All my icons were shoved over to one side, and a vast expanse of empty space yawned in the middle of it, with the background wallpaper I had chosen before my old card was fried sitting in the middle like a postage stamp. Whoa! She came up behind me. That good? I'm not sure what's going on here. My monitor isn't good enough to have this kind of resolution. I opened up the control panels and poked around. The graphics card was putting out an 8K signal, and my completely ordinary monitor was somehow displaying it. This is amazing. Stop fucking around and show me the art. Okay. I put the display on a slightly less amazing setting so I could read the labels on my icons, and pulled up the folder of images I had made. I opened the last one, the one I had worked hardest on and felt the best about. It was an old black-and-white pinup of Betty Page, topless, sitting with her hands on her knees and her characteristic half-seductive, half-playful look on her face. It was an iconic image, one any fan of pinups would have seen before. Except in the version I had altered, she had bigger boobs. Much bigger boobs. She had boobs whose size required awkward similes to gourds or sports equipment to describe. If they had been real, she'd have had trouble standing up, much less walking. There, I said. I expected a snort of derision. I hoped for a giggle. Instead, she let out a breathy, "Whoa!" I looked over my shoulder. Connie was leaning over the back of my chair, looking at the image with obvious appreciation. "That looks almost real," she whispered, as if making a louder noise might break the spell. "Well, it helps that it's black and white. You've never seen breast expansion stuff before?" "No." I pulled up another image. "I'm still learning how to do this. I'm not nearly as good as some of the others." The next image was a movie star in a low-cut gown from the runway at some awards show or other. My manipulations had given her an amazing pair, not as big as Betty Page's had been, but still far beyond what the real actress was blessed with in real life. "There are others?" Connie asked. "Honey, there is a whole community of people absolutely obsessed with enormous breasts." And Connie was entranced. You like all this? I asked carefully. I was afraid that if I got it wrong, I might break the spell and she'd realize just how much of a pervert I was and it would all come apart at the seams. I love it. Huh. Dude, you know I'm bisexual. Well, actually, I didn't. She rolled her eyes and shook her head. You can be so clueless sometimes. I'm sorry, okay? It's just not the kind of thing a guy expects. She turned my chair sideways, put her hands on the arms, and looked me in the eye. I'm bisexual. I like boobs. I like looking at them. I like touching them. I like squeezing them. Well, we have that in common, at least. Yes, we do. She grabbed my phone off the desk and held it out to me. You know what comes next, then. What? Do me. Take a picture and give me big giant boobs. Okay, sure. I unlocked my phone and pulled up the camera app. She stood back and struck a pose. Not like that, I said. Either profile or just face me. I'm not good enough yet for the 3/4 angle. She shifted her position, standing with her chest out, facing sideways. Maybe topless, if that's okay? It's not easy morphing loose clothes. Sure, she said. I trust you. She pulled off her t-shirt and held it in one hand as she resumed her pose, hands on hips and an enticing look on her face. Great, I said, and captured the image. A minute or so later, I had the image up in my editing software and started work. Connie watched for a while I zoomed in on her chest and carefully picked out the shape I was going to change, setting the boundary between the part I was going to warp and the part that was staying the same. It also wasn't very interesting to watch, so I wasn't surprised when she went back to studying. After a half hour or so, she put her shirt back on and gathered up her things. Time for my calculus exam, she said. I'll be back after. I'll be here, I said, not looking away from the screen. Good luck. I spent more time on that image than I had on any I had ever done previously. I fiddled and tweaked and adjusted, never quite satisfied. A bathroom break was the only intermission in the session. I was lucky that my finals for the fall semester were complete, because if I had needed it, this would have cut seriously into my study time. It was a little strange working on an image of someone I had a relationship with, but at the same time my software was working particularly well, almost anticipating what I wanted to do. It was coming along pretty easily, so I pushed myself, looking up YouTube videos to find new techniques and trying them out. Connie came back from her exam, looked over my shoulder, and whistled. That's pretty good. I had an image that granted my girlfriend an extra 6 inches or so of bust line, so that her boobs were about the size of the wheels on a toy wagon. More than handfuls, but not by much. It wasn't quite so much of a change as I had done with the others. She was still within the range that folks could have in reality, but smaller changes are easier, and I wanted to make it look natural. Not done yet, I said. Shape's still not right. Okay, well, don't let perfect get in the way of done. I'm going to listen to some podcasts, okay? Sure, no problem. I continued working while she sat on my bed with her earbuds in, occasionally glancing over to see my progress. My stomach was reminding me with audible signals that it was dinner time before I was done. There, what do you think? Connie came back and looked over my shoulder. Awesome, send it to me. I want it on my phone. I couldn't help a big smile on my face. This was all going way better than I could have imagined. I hit export to save off a finished image. Connie lurched and shoved my chair forward. Oops, sorry, she said. I lost my balance. Holy shit! When her weight was off, I pushed back from the desk and turned to face her. She was standing in the middle of my room looking down at an enormous bust, as big as it had been in the image. All I could do was just sit there and stare. The image I had made had become reality. Tentatively, Connie put her hands on her breasts and squeezed a little. Oh my God, they're real! What the fuck are they researching down there with those video cards? Forget about that! The implications of this transformation were rapidly dawning on me. Those weren't boobs Connie could just go on with her life carrying around. They were huge. I went back to the image editor, turned off all the layers that had my edits on them, and exported the file again, overwriting the first image with an unmodified one. I turned back to look and immediately closed my eyes and sighed. I hadn't ruined her life. She was back to normal. Hey! Connie had turned back in my direction with her hands on her hips and a scowl on her face. I was just making sure I could reverse it. You wouldn't want to go to dinner like that, would you? Maybe I would. Then she shrugged. Okay, yeah, maybe I wouldn't. I grabbed my phone and my wallet. Let's go to dinner. It's late and they'll be closing soon. In the elevator down to the cafeteria, my mind kept going back and forth between the weird graphics card that made impossible physics-defying changes to Connie and the implications for our relationship of the revelation she had made regarding her appreciation for boobs. The latter won out, and I found myself contemplating the possibilities as I rolled into the dining hall, got my ID scanned, and picked out what I wanted to eat. With just the skills and techniques I knew now, assuming the magic of the mysterious graphics card was up to it, I could make her boobs gigantic, far beyond anything humans were normally capable of. I could change her butt, too, and if I stepped up my photo editing skills, I could do all kinds of other things, too. We'd have to go slowly, though. I mean, would the addition of all that flesh have an impact on her vital organs? Would her heart and lungs be up to it? There were so many considerations, but I looked forward to exploring what we could do. Connie wiggled a little as she sat down at the table opposite me. There was a smile on her face and a bit of a flush to her cheeks. "What's up with you?" I asked. She closed her eyes and hunched her shoulders a little. "I can't wait to see what we can do," she said. I smiled back. "Me too, but—" I glanced around the room. The cafeteria was mostly empty, but there were still a few people scattered around, either folks like me who had nowhere else to go and were staying over until the spring semester started, or else still had a final exam or two. Let's not talk about it here. A familiar laugh came from a nearby table. I turned to see Julius and his girlfriend Patricia waving from the next table. "Hey, Dr. X!" Julius called out. I rolled my eyes and shook my head, turning back to my dinner. "Find any more mutants lately?" shouted Patricia, in a tone that left no doubt that she was mocking me, mocking us. I had been doing it ever since I came back to college. My hair had never properly recovered, and rather than trying to make something of the scraggly mess, I just shaved it every day, leaving me with a gleaming dome of a head that I didn't bother covering unless I was going outside. That and the chair had drawn more than one to make the comparison, though only Julius and Patricia seemed willing to say it to my face. "Fucking assholes," Connie muttered. She slammed her fork on the table and started to get out of her chair. I put my hand on hers. "Don't—" "If nobody stands up to them, they're just going to keep doing it," Connie replied. "If you hadn't noticed, they're talking about me, too." She waved vaguely at her face and hair and gave me a look of supreme frustration, lips pressed together in a thin line and eyes narrowed. We had been together long enough that I didn't really notice Connie's pure white hair and alabaster skin as something weird or different, especially since the contact lenses she wore to protect her retinas also gave her green eyes. Well, yeah, okay, good point. We were saved from having to confront them ourselves when another student walked over to their table and said something I couldn't hear. Julius threw his arms wide in a dramatic gesture. "What? Professor X is awesome! Anyone would be flattered to be compared with him." "We'd rather you didn't," I called back. "I'm tired of it." He scoffed. "It's a joke, come on!" "Not funny," the woman said, flatly. "Come on," said Patricia, picking up her tray. "Let's go somewhere folks have a sense of humor." "Schrodinger's comedian," Connie grumbled. "Only a joke if somebody calls him on it." I took a deep breath as the two departed the dining hall. A few people muttered and stared, but for the most part they went back to their meals. The woman who had confronted the couple came over to the table and squatted down next to me. "I'm sorry about that. Those two have been insufferable ever since Pat got accepted for a TA position. People have complained, but her supervisor, Dr. Shaw, is just as bad. They know exactly where the line is and toe it just to show everyone how good they are at gaming the system." "Wait, she's a TA now?" Connie pulled out her phone and swiped and jabbed at the screen. "My name's Richard Klein." I held out my hand. She shook it confidently. "Ranielle Ashburn." Ranielle was slender and long-limbed with elegant features. She reminded me of a fashion model. Her dreads were gathered at the back of her head with some bright beads and ribbons that contrasted with her obsidian hair. "Pleased to meet you," I said. Connie waved without looking up from her phone. "Connie Rourke." Then she groaned. "Of course. Of fucking course." I tried to peek at her phone. "What?" "Patricia over there," she spat, "is my TA for M&E." "M&E?" I asked. M&E, she clarified. "Mass and energy balances, required for my major." "Can you switch to a different section?" "I'm putting in for it, but the transfer needs to be approved." "By?" Connie looked up with a grim expression. "Dr. Shaw." Ranielle shook her head. "Doctor, suck it up, Buttercup." "I'm going to put in for it anyway." Connie tapped on her phone. "Worst they can do is say no." Raniel stood up and nodded to Connie. "Good luck to you." Connie waved as Raniel went back to her table. When she was done handling the bureaucracy, Connie poked at her dinner until she shook her head and said, "Gotta have the calories to fight the establishment," and dug in. "How about," I said, leaning over conspiratorially, "come back to my room and we can do some experiments to take your mind off your M&E." She reached across my back to give me a big hug. "You got it." We scarfed down our food, returned our trays, and hurried back to my room, making sure to lock the door behind us. We put our phones in airplane mode, and I disconnected my computer from the network. We did not want to be interrupted, and I was beginning to have a suspicion that if anyone found out we had a magic graphics card, Connie and I would be in trouble somehow. Connie stripped off her clothes and stood in the middle of the room. "All right, give it to me." "No, wait, hold on, I want a mirror." "Do you have a mirror?" "Just that one." I pointed to the mirror in the little shelving unit that came with the dorm room, high enough that the only thing I could do with it is check my non-existent hair. Connie turned to face it. "Okay, go, I'm ready." I rolled up to my computer and pulled up my editing software and loaded the project that had Connie's image. With a few taps on the mouse, I enabled the layers where I had made the changes and exported the file. Connie's whoop of surprise turned into a laugh. I turned my chair to see that the gigantic breasts were back, filling her hands and more, fat pink nipples poking out between her fingers. She squeezed them, smiling and chuckling lower in her throat, then turned toward me and spread her hands. "They're beautiful!" I flipped my armrests out of the way again, and she straddled my knees and pressed her chest into my face. Pale pink skin enveloped me. I blew a raspberry against her chest, causing the warm, soft flesh to flap against my face. She laughed again. "I have always wanted to do that." When she pulled away, I cupped her breasts and pushed them together, making a grand valley of cleavage. "Maybe once we're done playing, I can leave you with a little more than you usually have." She shrugged. "I don't have the money for all new clothes. Even just a little bit would mean I need new bras." "Forget bras," I quipped. "Tools of the patriarchy." "People get distracted if a nipple is poking my shirt." "That's their problem." "And my nipples get irritated rubbing against my clothes." "Okay, fair. But wouldn't it be worth it?" "I'll think about it. In the meantime," she raised a nipple to my mouth, "let's have some fun." I sucked on the proffered nub, felt it get harder in my mouth, heard Connie's breathing get heavier. I let it slip out for a moment, rubbing the stubble on my chin against it. "I want to touch your cunt." "Oh, yes, do that," she replied. My fingers found her slit, stroking lightly at first, then probing deeper, rubbing along her inner lips in slow, even motions. She moaned and arched her back, pressing her chest into my face with her hands on the back of my head. I sucked again, filling my mouth with her flesh. My own arousal was growing, bringing a tingle to my fingertips and a tightness to my chest as my heart beat faster. I had done this. I had performed this. Well, magic was the only way to describe it. I had shaped her flesh, given her this glorious bust, and she had consented to it. No, she had asked for it, begged for it even. I could hardly contain my excitement. When I needed to come up for air, I tilted my head back and licked the underside of her chin. Connie immediately bent her head and kissed me hard, her body quivering as I continued stroking her slit. Our tongues touched for just a moment before she pulled back and looked down where her prodigious cleavage was pressed against my chest. "I want to take off your shirt," she breathed. "Go ahead." I raised my arms so she could pull off my t-shirt, then pressed her chest against mine, making the flesh smoosh up into two pillows. She played with them that way, dragging her nipples against my chest hair, side to side and up and down, both of us watching the way they moved. My own nipples got hard, too, flicking against hers with each stroke. I put my hand back between her legs, where her juices were starting to flow. Usually, I would bring some up to taste it, but it was a little awkward with her tits up under my chin this way, so I resumed the strokes I had used before. We had been together enough that I knew her rhythms and had worked out a reliable technique for getting her off the way she liked. "You're really enjoying this," I observed. "It's awesome," she moaned, and closed her eyes as a shudder ran through her. I laughed. I felt drunk on her ecstasy, drunk on the power she had given me, both in terms of the magical graphics card and the permission to change her body this way. Her shudders grew more and more intense, and as I sensed her climax overcoming her, I put an arm around her back to keep her from falling. She had done that the first time we had sex, and it wasn't fun. She groaned deeply as spasms shook her body, and then collapsed against me, head over my shoulder, as little aftershocks made her twitch every second or two. When she was done, she looked at me with dreamy eyes. "That was great, thank you." "Thank you," I replied. "Need a shower?" "Yes, please." She climbed off my lap and wiped at the juice running down her leg. Wouldn't be good to go back to my room smelling like sex. Your roommate gives you a hard time? No, she just can't find anyone decent to get with. Horny all the time and nothing to do about it except Bob. She went into my bathroom and turned on the shower. Bob? Oh, right. Battery-operated boyfriend. I put my armrests back down so I could work my sweatpants and underwear down off my butt, then reached down to slip off my shoes and socks and pull them off the rest of the way. I set my shoes on the shelf next to my bed and dropped the dirty clothes into the laundry basket by the door. Connie got out of my way as I wheeled my chair up to the stall and then transferred myself to the bench using the grab bars. Showering with Connie was a lot better than doing it alone. First, of course, was the opportunity to touch all over her beautiful body, but her assistance made it a lot easier to get myself clean as well. I could do it, but it was quicker and easier with help, and a lot more fun when it was Connie's help. Once we were done and all dried off, another activity that was much easier and more fun with Connie, I transferred back to my chair and returned to my computer. Ready to change back? I asked, still a little nervous that she would get stuck. She sighed. Yeah, I suppose. I kind of wish I could stay like this a while, but they are kind of heavy. We'll do this again soon, right? Oh, absolutely. And next time we can go even bigger. All right then, back to regular old Connie. As before, I turned off the layers where I had made the changes and exported the file that had turned her back to normal before. And nothing happened. At least, nothing happened to Connie. She was just as busty as she had been before I saved off the file. On the screen, a window popped up that said, Thalmic Resources Insufficient. A picker underneath said, Restore from, and had 3 options, reading Ambient, Plexal, and Chronal. I shook my head. What the hell? I poked around a bit and found out that the error message had come from the weird graphics card. Looks like it ran out of magic, said Connie, looking over my shoulder. I guess it wants to fill up again? Maybe ambient means just free-floating magic all around, she continued. Probably the safest to pick that. We don't know what the others would do. I clicked ambient. Another window popped up. Gathering ambient thalmic resources, it said, with a progress bar underneath. It started off saying 6 days, then 4 weeks, then an hour, and then finally settled down on a countdown for 14 hours and 50 minutes. Oh, shit, said Connie. My exam's first thing in the morning. And that's our story. That was a taste of what's available in the Nobilis Erotica Patreon feed, available at every support level. Signing up now will get you access not only to this ongoing story, but previous ones like Bra of Holding and Everfull Cup, and access to the supporter Discord. Sign up at patreon.com/Nobilis. You have been listening to the Nobilis Erotica Podcast. The music is composed and performed by Mass Relay. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Until next time, listen hard.